And welcome back to the Hot Lap, where we are talking more Felipe Massa's dreams about that 2008 title, hidden mechanisms and concealed parts. Yes, all that Flexi wing saga going into Singapore. Mercedes being optimistic about that very Singapore. The FIA about rule changes for 2025, and F1.com, the official F1 channel, have got a few interesting talking points even, going into the Singapore Grand Prix this weekend. But let's start with Felipe Massa. Yes, we're going all the way back to 2008, where Felipe Massa has launched this legal bid, let's say, to become a champion. Sort of. So this is on planetf1.com, and one of Felipe Massa's legal team's hopes, Hamilton is going to support, the legal team are hoping that Lewis Hamilton is going to support his bid to claim the 2008 championship in court, as he has always defended sporting integrity. Now, pointedly, that is not coming from Felipe Massa. That is coming from his legal team. And that's Bernardo Viana. I probably got the name wrong. Bernardo, I'm really sorry if that's not true. Of the Sao Paulo Vieira Resende Advogados law firm. Once again, I got that wrong. I could profusely apologise. But anyway, he's representing Massa's case in Brazil. And he recently said that the stellar legal team, assembled by the former F1 driver, is looking to bring the trophy home. And they hope Hamilton will lend his support. Hamilton, obviously, the 2008 champion. Now, Viana maintained Massa's legal team have absolutely nothing against Hamilton in their pursuit of the case. But this has been brought about following reported comments from Bernie Ecclestone earlier this year, in which the FIA and F1 had knowledge of Crashgate, the Crashgate scandal in Singapore that year, which obviously meant, from their point of view, that Massa was cheated out of the title he deserved. No, we're not talking about 2021 Abu Dhabi. We're talking about 2008. Now, the Ecclestone, however, he's come out a while back claiming to not remember giving the interview in question, and that was to F1 Insider Germany. So Felipe Massa's legal team are asking support from Lewis Hamilton. So upon seeing the publication of the interview, Massa assembled a team of lawyers, as we know, to challenge this World Championship result, 15 years after its conclusion. And with Ecclestone purportedly stating in that interview that, according to the statutes, we should have cancelled the race in Singapore under these conditions, after Nelson Piquet Jr., as you know, was found to have deliberately crashed in order to benefit Fernando Alonso winning the race. So the safety car came out, prompting race leader Massa to pit. All fair and good. I think he was in the lead at that point, though he and his Ferrari crew had botched a pit stop as he drove away with his fuel hose still attached, leaving the Brazilian without any points. Should the race have been cancelled, F1 boss Ecclestone added, that means it would never have happened for the World Championship standings, then Felipe Massa would have become World Champion and not Lewis Hamilton. Now, in a letter sent to the FIA and FOM, as seen by Planet F1, Massa's legal team, they had given this governing body a deadline of the 8th of September to respond to their letter before proceeding to the UK High Court. It is now understood, however, an extension has been agreed, with Viana confirming that Massa's legal team have, in good faith, agreed to a new October deadline. Alongside that, he's hoping Lewis Hamilton will offer his backing to Massa in this case. I don't understand why they're asking Lewis Hamilton to back, because he's obviously quite honourable, etc., and honest. Yes, I mean, if you look at what he did to Piastri at Monza, fair enough, okay. So they're looking for Tim, even though the preferred outcome would mean the former McLaren driver being stripped of his first World Championship. They've said he is an important ambassador for the sport and has always defended sporting integrity. Yes. He is an honorary Brazilian citizen. Yes. Very well liked by Brazilians. Yes. So I hope he supports us. I don't know. Ultimately, we have absolutely nothing against Hamilton. And sports law barrister Nick DeMarco, who's also acting on Massa's behalf, wrote to Reuters with the case raises a number of very important and interesting legal issues, as well as fundamental matters of sporting integrity. And now I'm sure it will be of great interest not only to all motorsports fans, but to anyone with an interest in the fairness of sports competitions, he added. I'm just laughing at the fact that Felipe Massa is basically going up to Lewis saying, no offence, mate, but can you help me take away your championship? Which is interesting. And of good faith. Now, if you remember the Belgium Grand Prix of 2008, which Felipe Massa won, funnily enough, because of a controversial decision by the stewards to give Lewis Hamilton not a 5-second, but a big penalty, big enough to lose that race. Because what happened in that race, him and Raikkonen were battling to and fro. Both of them were going off the circuit. Hamilton went off the circuit and he kind of kept the lead at the bus stop, I think, and then he let Raikkonen by. And Raikkonen, he wasn't pretty much car length ahead, then flipped and got past Raikkonen almost straight away. Okay, fair enough. But then he received a really big penalty for Felipe Massa to then win the race, which he probably didn't deserve. Raikkonen ended up crashing anyway. It was a crazy end to what was a really interesting Grand Prix. Felipe Massa did not deserve to win that race, though. So, ergo, the reason I'm obviously saying it's not sour grapes or anything like that in 2008. That was a somewhat controversial decision, which a lot of people didn't agree with. And it's things like that. Can you really, really go back for something like that? I think Abu Dhabi is completely different because that was outside. That was the sports governing body, the sports bosses, making what ended up being an illegal decision, let's say. And they admitted that. This is something happening in a race, and that was the last race Saturday. So this is completely different. So I just don't understand Massa's lawyers. And also, I mean, Felipe Massa on the day, just like Hamilton and Abu Dhabi, absolute, fantastic, magnanimous, brilliant, and given obviously all that pressure, having won the championship, and then not. And then now, I can't help but feel that's going to be lost a tiny bit, maybe. And it's really sad. It's really quite sad, isn't it? So next up on motorsport.com by Jonathan Noble. Sorry, the previous story was by Henry Valentine. By Jonathan Noble, it's got hidden mechanisms, concealed parts, and this is what triggers F1's Flexi wing clamp down. This is from today. The potential for hidden one-way mechanisms, and from the 11th of September today, at the time of recording. So the potential for hidden one-way mechanisms and moving parts concealed by rubber components have emerged as key driving forces behind this Flexi wing clampdown. He says that from this weekend's obviously Singapore Grand Prix, the FIA has obviously been tougher on front and rear wings in a bid to stop teams playing, using their flexible parts. So, as first revealed by motorsport.com, the FIA demanded to see all design drawings of wing ahead of this race in Singapore and check that they comply. And bearing in mind, they've outlawed these new wings, and this included wing elements that move or rotate in relation to the bodywork they're fixed to. The FIA, as we know, have had a long-faced battle to stay on top of the team's Flexi wing antics, and I remember the big rumours kind of began in Red Bull's original massive run with Sebastian Vettel, between 2010, 2013, Flexi wings were a big deal back then. Now, an exclusive interview with motorsport.com's Italian site, Tombazis, I got that name wrong again, obviously, but he's explained the thinking behind this new tough stance. He said, in the F1 regulations, we have many flexibility criteria. There are loads that we apply, and a certain deflection is allowed, he said. There are static tests that we do to check, and I said ruffle, that we do need to check, and it's obvious that these tests are never perfect because of the direction of the test load you apply is always a bit different from the load that is on the track when it experiences genuine aerodynamic force. So what they do, they essentially put weight on it, but they're saying that's a bit different to the aero kind of like pushing it down when they're actually on the track. He said, there may be differences, and for this reason, in the regulation, there are some general and conceptual specifications that, in essence, prohibit mechanisms. For example, he says, you could draw a wing that when applying the forces of the FIA test is fixed, but when applying any other load, it could be more flexible. For this reason, we have been clarifying for years that mechanisms are not legal, and we have written several clarifications on what we consider a mechanisms. Tombazis then suggested that a line had to be drawn because of clever mechanisms that teams could use to get around the rules, which has included the use of designs hidden beneath rubber coverings. He goes on to say that if a carbon surface, we have levers that allow deflection in one direction and not another, we can consider this as a mechanism, he said. Another thing we have said in the past is that it's not acceptable when a component has relative motion against an adjacent element sliding in a different direction. What happened recently? He goes on to say that some teams have components adjacent to each other that have a fairly high movement but do not slide in tandem. Because these areas are covered with rubber material, we do not consider this acceptable, and for this reason we made a clarification. So, and furthermore, he says it's been inspecting the flexibility of the lower rear wing components to the crash structure. The flexibility of the upper rear wing elements has better policed thanks to the introduction of reference dots from the 2021 Azerbaijan Grand Prix. So I think what he means is these rubber things, where it flexes, it would only flex, for example, in one direction by putting these like hidden rubber components between wings, which is a bit naughty, really. What teams are doing it? Don't know. Could be any of them. Will we find out in Singapore? Probably not. But will there be speculation? Absolutely. Talking about Singapore, Mercedes are optimistic the Singapore Grand Prix layout will suit Hamilton and George Russell for their car. So, as we know, Ferrari were the closest team last time out at Monza to Red Bull, while Russell and Hamilton maximised their pace to finish a really good 5th and 6th. Monza is almost a complete contrast to the streets of Singapore, which relies more on high downforce and mechanical grip. There is a reason to think that the car will work better, and that is because Singapore is a maximum downforce circuit, says Andrew Shovelin. He's the engineering director of Mercedes. He's going to know more than me anyway. So our performance at the high downforce tracks like Barcelona, Budapest and even Zandvoort, the car was working well and we've had pretty strong performance. We're hoping to be able to be a bit quicker there and get back to a position where we can challenge for podiums. The track, though, does throw us some pretty unique challenges, and we've also got some layout changes which we described in my last video for this year. There's a sequence of 4 corners near the end of the lap that have been removed where the track used to go underneath the grandstand through a tunnel. That's now gone. We've got a longer straight which will change a little bit how the tyres are working. There's a bit less energy there, but it's also an abrasive tarmac. We've got the softest 3 compounds, so it's a pretty tough race on the tyres, and it's also a bumpy street circuit. And added to that, the race is run at night, plenty of challenges for us to try and tackle, but we're essentially optimistic for a good performance, so that's good. The FIA rule change is coming in potentially for 2025. So, as we know, this is from WTF1.com by Charlie Williams. It goes on to say the 2025, it seems so far, far away. I guess it does. Yet the FIA are already making plans to improve racing, more specifically overtaking. He said that FIA single-seater director, Nicholas Tombazis, that same guy, he's come up again, hasn't he? Has confirmed the sports governing body they're looking at the rules for 2025. He said, don't worry, you'll still have an extra year before we buckle down the major regulation overhaul in 26. These planned for 25 modifications, though, instead will be minor tweaks to improve the car's ability to follow each other a bit more easily. As we know, in 2022, we have cars that could follow each other really, really well. And the developments made to these cars this year have an adverse effect, though, on how well the cars can follow. The drivers have been complaining about this from the start of the season. Most recently, Carlos Sainz, he told the media, in 99% of the tracks, I think we're going to need DRS. And we're going to need powerful DRS because these cars from the beginning of the year, like Matt said, it's starting to feel a bit like 2021 or 2020. And now the FIA plans to address these complaints and tweaks for the cars for 25. Now, in an interview with motorsport.com, Tombas said these, if we take 2021 cars, based on being 2 car lengths from the car in front, they were losing about 50% of the aero load. In 2022, it's only about 20%. But he said right now we've gone back with these current cars to 35%. And they basically want to sort that out, make it easy to follow. Having said that, the 22 season of this season were a lot more boring than the 21 season, where it was hard to follow. But there we go. So it's race week, and Formula1.com and the special contributor Chris Medland is talking to us about interesting things, 5 key storylines going into the Singapore Grand Prix. He says another challenge to Red Bull. As we know, Max Verstappen and Red Bull continuing to dominate. However, it could potentially throw up a surprise result here, I guess he's saying. He says Red Bull's high downforce level meant that they could protect their tyres for better than Ferrari at basically Monza and scoring that 1-2. But immediately after the race, Max admitted Singapore was going to be a little more difficult. It's not going to be one of the strongest weekends. Now, given the overall strength of the RB19, he's saying that it's a surprise to hear Verstappen downing his chances. But Mercedes and Aston Martin will both be targeting stronger challenges as they offered in Italy. And also, he said, the same could go for McLaren. Could it be that Red Bull will have to deal with multiple threats in Singapore? Let's hope so. He said the intense battle of the podiums. He's talking about the fact that even if Red Bull maintain their advantage, who knows? We have no idea going into the Singapore Grand Prix who is going to get third. He said, but more than that, and also he talks about the Constructors' Championship hotting up. Mercedes currently second in the standings. Ferrari closed the gap in Italy. They're just 56 points now behind Mercedes, and Aston Martin and Ferrari, obviously, as we know, scoring really well. He said McLaren's progress towards the 3 teams has stalled a little bit in the past 2 rounds. They now sit 102 points behind Aston Martin, but at many venues, they still expect to be a threat across the race incident too. Then he talked about final driver market on Thursday at the Italian Grand Prix. Mercedes announced, obviously, Lewis and George Russell. But we've got Zhou at Alfa Romeo and Logan Sargent at Williams are both yet to have their futures resolved as we're going into September. And as is often the case, there's no announcement for who will drive for AlphaTauri next year, with Red Bull regularly taking their time before finalising their drivers. Could it be Daniel Ricciardo? The latest rumour was the drive could be between Tsunoda and Lawson, and they're going to keep Ricciardo. But I think that's also based on how good Ricciardo is when he comes back, potentially in Qatar. He talks about the cost cap. As we know, the cost cap this year, all teams passed, fantastic. Brilliant. But he says, as is often the case in competitive sport, it's still likely to be a talking point as teams try to work out if their spending budget is in the most effective way under the cost cap, if they can learn from their rivals by how their rivals are doing. And a spectacular physical test. It's well known that the Singapore Grand Prix is one of the most physical and hardest races of the year. At night, it is really, really hot as well. They have taken, as we saw in our previous race week video that we put out, the track has changed. That may change some of the demand a tiny bit, but still, it's it's one of the longest races of the year, I think, in terms of time as well. So I do think it could be interesting. I think a lot of it depends how qualifying goes. But there we go. So this has pretty much been the hot lap. We will see you next time for some more news, maybe some racing. Please like, subscribe if you're not, if you enjoyed it. Give me a comment if you made it to the end. I'll be very, very impressed and very, very happy. And any like I get, any subscribe I get like a notification in Google. It does make me smile a lot. It does mean a lot. I'm not just saying that. It really does. We just started the channel. It's really, really new. So anything, I always try and answer comments as well. Might not do so in a timely manner because sometimes I don't know whether we've got one or not until obviously I get like an alert. So thank you so much for anyone that's commented. Thank you for liking. Thank you so much for subscribing. It is really, really appreciated. Let's roll on into Singapore. All the news coming up as well. We may well talk about the weather tomorrow as well. Who knows? Thank you very much. This has been the Hot Lap. Speak to you soon.